Not to go too far away, I and my colleague have reported harassment many times, especially during elections by security personnel. And now, the most recent one that has been spotlighted is that of the former editor of First News, Segun Olatunji, who recently resigned from his position following his release from detention.
Now, you might be wondering what led to his detention. Well, according to reports, Segun Olatunji had spent 14 days in the custody of Defense Intelligence Agency, the DIA, in Abuja, for a report on Chief of Staff of President Bola Tinubu, which is Femi Gbajabiamila. Now, the report, titled How Gbajabiamila Attempted to Corner $30 billion, 66 Houses Traced by Sabiu, was written by Olatunji. Here's a video by Segun Olatunji giving an account of his arrest and detention.
I was in my house in Lagos. I was watching journalist hangouts with my 7-year-old son. Then suddenly, I saw soldiers burst into the sitting room. Then somebody came and said, "Give me your glasses." I gave him the glasses, and then they put a blindfold on me. And then they moved me into the aircraft. And then we took off. And we landed in Abuja. I didn't know it was in Abuja. I didn't know we were in Abuja. I didn't know where we were. We landed. When we landed, they took me straight, still blindfolded. Took me straight, and they took me to their office. Immediately we got there, they put leg cuffs. In addition to the handcuffs, they put leg cuffs. I was wondering whether I'd been named as a coupist. I don't know. Then they took me in. They took all my clothes, removed my trousers. I was left with my boxer shorts. They took everything. Still blindfolded, they took me in and took me into a cell.
I'm not even sure where to begin. Even though we didn't get the full clip of that, it just reeks of the time of the military era where journalists, where people generally could just be abducted from their homes and taken away. Journalists are known to be, or are called, the fourth estate of the realm. This is no way to treat a journalist, but the conversation is not just for us here in the studio. We're now joined by Ibrahim Dan Haliu, who's a veteran journalist and public affairs analyst, who joins us virtually now. Ibrahim, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
All right, Ibrahim, let me start by asking you, in your more than 30 years of journalism, more than 30 years as a journalist, can you share any, of your, would I say, bitter or dark experiences as a journalist with us? Some of us here have some of ours, and we don't even have up to 30 years of experience. Can you share some of yours with you? Maybe one of the most touching or most memorable ones as a journalist?
Good evening, listeners and audience. My name is Ibrahim Dan Haliu. I don't think in my years of experience, I have had a personal experience of mistreatment as a journalist. But maybe the hazards of the job, maybe in terms of intimidation, harassment by maybe law enforcement, and then sometimes even the people that you want to cover. So that is one thing. But in terms of incarceration or arrest and detention, I only experienced it recently during the Buhari regime. When I did a post on Facebook, I did a piece on Revolution Now, and immediately the DSS saw it, they ordered for my arrest. The DSS invaded my house in Kaduna at around 3 a.m. They invaded the house, jumped over the fence of my house, and then started hitting the door of my entrance. When we opened, we didn't know what was happening. Actually, I thought it was armed robbers that came for their own nocturnal operations. Eventually, it turned out that they were men of the DSS, and their mission was to arrest me. They should not allow me to sleep in my home before 6 a.m. I should be in their office, Kaduna, where I stayed for 14 days without trial. I was not even taken to court. I was not told what my offense was till when the director broke the news to me after a day that I was supporting one of the revolutionaries in Nigeria who was calling for a revolution in Nigeria, that is Omole Sowore. So I stayed in their custody for 14 days. That was in 2018. So that was my only horrible experience actually as a journalist. But besides that, most of the hazards I went through were just in terms of going into very difficult terrain to cover stories, to cover events, especially during the Zangon Katab crisis. I was there to cover Zangon Katab crisis in 2001. And then I was in Bochu also during the Tapawa Palewa communal clashes. So some of those, even in Sokoto, I did coverage of in Kano, the Metasine, and some of these other. But besides that, actually, I don't have any experience in terms. That's my only experience with regard to actually violation of my freedom as a journalist or as a citizen.
Okay, so Ibrahim, you have shared your experience, and you know, we might think it's little, but there's no little experience when it comes to press freedom. And we've also heard of so many other people who have been harassed, who have been tortured, some who have been, you know, kidnapped for a long time, some who have even lost their lives, unfortunately. Now, I would ask, in terms of, I know that we're not trying to apportion blames, we're trying to find a solution, but who is to blame? Do we say that the Constitution either enables, permits, or does not do enough in terms of press freedom? Because if we look at this situation of Segun Olatunji, we would realize that it's, in the Gen Z term, it's given scapegoating journalists to instill fear, because we've heard several times where stories that are misleading or untrue are published, and then they call for apologies. And in this case, we know that Gbajabiamila's lawyer, who is Kemi, had actually written to the outlets asking for an apology. So if that had happened, why exactly did they have to go the full length of taking him from his house, torturing him? And, you know, the whole process just looked like a kidnap situation as opposed to arrest and things like that. So basically, my question is, do we blame the Constitution? Do we blame the government? Do we blame the press? Who's to be blamed?
I don't think it's the fault of the Constitution or the journalists. I think I blame the security agencies. It's like they are overzealous. They are overzealous in carrying out their duties. Because sometimes most of these things happen behind the eyes or even the ears of the political leaders. They are not even aware of those things. Most of the times, especially during military regimes, during the civilian regimes, because the politicians know that there is press freedom guaranteed by the Constitution. That is why even the Constitution recognizes the press as the fourth estate of the realm. So it's not really journalists or government per se. But where I would blame the government is when you find these overzealous officials, security personnel doing this, they are not reprimanded. There is no recourse to justice, to punish them for what they have done. So it's like you are encouraging them or you are giving them a free will to do whatever they want, to interpret freedom in their own way. Right, that's the way I see it.
Okay.
Most of the times, the public officials, they are not the ones that order the arrest or the detention. It's just out of overzealousness of the security agencies.
All right, Ibrahim, thank you. Now, you just stated that more often than not, the politicians, in this case, may not even know about these things happening. I grew up in the military barracks, and you know, I grew up in, at least I saw several coups in my short years on earth. And even during the military time was something similar to this. We get reports where certain journalists, certain people are being detained almost in this manner that we saw and like you gave, and they are being tortured even in those times. And then we get to hear that the military heads of states then, the likes of Babangida, the late General Sani Abacha, didn't give these instructions, just like you clearly stated. Their followers, their staff are unnecessarily overzealous. But now, you know, the milk has been spilled. This has happened already. How then do journalists seek redress? In the military era, it was difficult. But now this is supposed to be a democracy where the rule of law should be upheld and should be maintained. But if, like my colleague here has said, the journalists cannot seek redress, then this show of intimidation only continues, thus hindering journalists from doing the job as they should. So my question again is, how are we supposed to seek redress when these things happen such that it serves as a deterrent for others not to do the same?
Yeah, I think the only way is to go through the judicial process. We have to test the judiciary, our judiciary, even though most people don't have confidence in the judiciary. But I think that is the only way that we can seek redress and get some of these things actually reduced to the barest minimum. Because, and here the NUJ has to come in, the Nigerian Guild of Editors have to come in, even the Newspaper Proprietors Association of Nigeria, they also have to be involved. It has to be a kind of collaboration to promote and also enhance this press freedom in Nigeria. It's not a responsibility of the journalists alone. So I will advise that the Nigerian Union of Journalists and all other affiliated organizations should be able to come up with maybe a committee that will actually work out the modalities of how to set up a judicial, a committee on judiciary that will be looking into some of these cases affecting journalists and take on them instead of allowing the journalists alone to go about pursuing these cases, because they don't even have the resources actually. So it is their employers and also their union that should be able to support them. I think we started something like that in Kaduna in the early 2000s when we discovered that there is a lot of harassment and intimidation of journalists doing their own official duties. We established a committee. We call it a disciplinary committee, but the committee's job is not just to reprimand journalists who try to actually go beyond their limit and do things that are out of the professional ethics, but also to protect journalists against all these abuses and violation of their human rights and legitimate expression, freedom of expression. So I think something like that has to be set up at the national level so that from there we can see how it works and then probably domesticate it in the other chapters of the journalists at various states.
Okay, Ibrahim.
That's one way of doing it.
Yeah, please go ahead. You weren't finished.
Secondly, there is the World Press Freedom is trying importance of press freedom or freedom of expression, this kind of maltreatment to journalists instead of supporting them, because most people don't understand the importance of freedom of the press. They don't know most of these things that journalists are doing, going through all this inconvenience, is to ensure that the citizens' rights are protected and are guaranteed. But most times, maybe because of ignorance or because of maybe years of military rule, people don't tend to understand.
Okay, I think we're having technical delays from Ibrahim's end. Ibrahim, can you hear us?
Putting journalists or journalism as a profession.
All right, Ibrahim, if you can hear me, I'm just going to go straight to the next question. Now, I want to circle back to the overzealousness of security agencies. And if we look at it critically, it's on a spectrum, because some people would argue that some journalists as well, tend to go...
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, so I just want to quickly ask my next question, and I said that I wanted to circle back to the aspect of security agencies being overzealous, and I say that some people would also argue that some journalists tend to go over and beyond in some cases, so it's basically a spectrum, and I really want to ask, where do we draw the line, and what's the yardstick for determining when someone, is doing too much on the part of the journalists and on the part of the security agencies? Now, in this story, for example, looking at Segun Olatunji's story, we see, like I said earlier, it's looking more like a kidnap situation. It's nothing to instill discipline. It's nothing. It's not a warning. It's not. These people literally camped close to his wife's shop for days and then used her as a bait to get him, took him, stripped him, and did things basically. And at the end of the day, they even called someone to come and meet them somewhere. That's a pattern of kidnap, so a lot of times, let me just quickly confirm, Ibrahim, if you can hear us.
I can hear you.
Okay, did you get my question so far?
Yes, I did.
Okay, so I'm just trying to ask, how do we draw the line? How do we hear security agencies saying that these journalists are doing too much, they put out false stories, but the measures they take are quite extreme. So what is the balance? Ibrahim, are you there? Okay, well, I'll wait for Ibrahim. I'm guessing that you understand what I'm trying to say.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Clearly, there is a thin line sometimes in the will I say, the excitement, let me use that word, to do your job as a journalist, and I've been there before as a field journalist, you sometimes cross the line. That's where professionalism comes in, and that's where some kind of restraint comes in for journalists. This is me speaking for myself and how I do my job. In the bid to tell the truth, in the bid to tell a story as it should be told, you should know where to draw the line. You should know that authenticity of whatever you are reporting is more important than the time frame with which you want to break the story. And that usually is where the challenge is. So something, especially now where social media is agog with all sorts, where AI is used to tell stories and to paint pictures and to put out videos, you cannot tell whether a video is real, whether something that was written was truly said or not. But everybody wants to be the first to break a story. Again, authenticity of the story is more important, is far more important than the time frame at which you break the story. The moment we begin to understand that, I think we would give ourselves some guard and some respect so that you don't play into the hands of these, of these persons, basically. And I think it is also important that at this point, like he was saying at some point, the rule of law has to come to play. If truly these people are overzealous, then when these matters are brought up to their bosses, in this case of Gbajabiamila,
what is done about it?
Exactly, what is done about it? What has he done about it? What's he going to do about it? It's expected that these persons know the importance of journalism in, in the polity, in democracy. Without journalists, there will be no gatekeeping, which means that our democracy is as good as military rule, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I do understand that there's a part of journalists also being overzealous and, putting out stories that may have an element of,
sensationalism, maybe.
Yeah, in it and all that. But I think that is where, and a lot of times we see these things play out where, journalists or a media house or an outlet puts out something that maybe tends to be false. These people reach out to the outlets and ask for an apology.
Exactly.
And that's how it should be done. So if you give them a warning and nothing is done about it, then you can go ahead and take legal actions, not kidnapping them
the journalists,
and torturing them.
I mean, there are guidelines to what you can do as what you should do. Go by the law. Just the way the same journalists too will go by the law. And I'll quickly chip in one thing there. Like Ibrahim was saying, I think the associations that journalists belong to, the groups that they belong to, the organizations that they work for, it's about time they started standing up for their staff and their journalists. You can't leave the journalists to dance the tune alone whenever things go wrong or things go south. But when the journalist does well, you share the glory with them. So it's time for organizations to actually back their journalists.
Yeah. So on that note, I'm going to say kudos to Olatunji's organization, because besides the organization, even journalists rallied around and kept demanding for his release, and probably that's why it was prompt. But we wouldn't say that this has not had a ripple effect, because now he's had to resign from his position, and at the same time, he says that he still gets threats. How long are we going to keep doing that? It's just...
It is sad and scary.
It is. It is. But anyways, we'll go on a short break. You're still watching Report Desk Africa. And when we come back, we're going to be talking about another story, which is quite disturbing. And, one can argue that it's for the benefit of the country. But if you want to find out, just stay tuned.